constant state of fear and misery. No, you're me anymore. Live in a constant state of fear and misery. No, live in a constant state of fear and misery. No, you're me anymore.
Hello, everybody. Today is Sunday, October 28th, and we're bringing you Block Digest number 135 at block height 547,714. So, Bitcoin, I just want to say, fuck you and this constant spitting out like 4 or 5 fucking blocks in a row every time right before we start an episode. I'm sick of it, okay? I'm sick of it. You make one block, I make one picture, and stop making work for me.
We are creating the Block Digest kindness guidelines, so...
Fuck that. No, we're not. This is a dictatorship. I decide everything. You don't fucking like it, you can fuck off.
Damn, that's some pretty hardcore guidelines right there. That's all right, though.
I believe that's what Satoshi Nakamoto said, too, when he released the Bitcoin white paper 10 years ago. If you don't like it, fuck off.
Yeah, I think it was in that vein.
Yeah, so I don't think it's a news item, but we are now 3 days away from the 10th anniversary of the Bitcoin white paper being released.
Oh, I cannot wait to say over a decade. Every time I'm talking and I talk about Bitcoin history, I'm like, over it. I'm like, nah, it's right under a decade. Like, as soon as we get over a decade, it's going to be a lot easier to talk.
And I think like last year, we're going to be having an episode that day too. So you can get silly, do something funny.
Woohoo! Yeah. Oh yeah, and I'm back here on video camera, everyone, for right now. Bandwidth, if everything remains, it'll be here, but might have to cut out. We'll see.
Ew. Okay. All right. All right. Joking phase done. Into the serious phase, where we talk about news and stuff and act like we know what we're talking about. All right. So, over the past few days, one of the stupidest ideas I have ever seen in the history of this entire ecosystem was announced. Bitgo, Kyber Network, and Republic Protocol have announced WBTC, Wrapped Bitcoin. And this incredibly stupid idea is effectively print an ERC20 token that's backed by Bitcoin. So a Bitcoin stable coin locked on Ethereum. And really looking at this, the logic of it is just so broken in so many ways. I'm going to get probably a little scatterbrained going through this. But really the first comment I want to make is this is like a low rent retard engineered version of Liquid on probably the most broken unscalable public chain ever. So it's pretty much trying to replicate what a federated quasi centralized system is doing, but instead of actually building their own private chain that they can control and manage the efficiencies of, they're going to try and do it on the most unscalable shitty public blockchain in existence. And so the first thing really is probably going to do a little compare and contrast to Liquid here, is that unlike Liquid, so far, unless there's some developments and who wants to get involved in this project, it looks like Bitgo is going to be the sole custodian of Bitcoins locked up in the system. So right there is the first thing that is kind of absurd and just makes it objectively completely inferior to something like Liquid. Like Liquid is pretty much designed in a way where things are locked up in a hardware controlled automated environment with custody split between a large number of different participants. And it's set up in this way so that the actual cashing out process can be facilitated redundantly by any number of the federators involved in the system, and set up in tamper-proof hardware so that this process cannot be interfered with by any other members of the Federation. So it's set up in a way so that no group or individual in the Federation without a supermajority can really try to do anything like lock people out of being able to exit the system. And really, when it comes down to that, with the tamper-proof hardware, you can't even really do that in a selective way. You would literally just have to shut the system down in order to really prevent somebody from exiting it without overcoming all of the tamper-proof safeguards put into the hardware. Whereas with this WBTC, it is literally just Bitgo. Like, until more people get involved or show interest in this, it's one person in sole custody of all the funds backing this token. And ultimately, you're going to have to KYC yourself. And I can see really no way around this regulatorily to withdraw your WBTC from this Ethereum smart contract. And that is yet another really screwy and inferior distinguishing aspect from something like Liquid. The entire way Liquid is set up is it is exchanges that are actually federating the system, and it's specifically set up for exchange customers. So anybody who's actually using Liquid will already have some kind of trusted relationship and have KYC'd themselves with an exchange they're involved with, so that there is no real additional requirement in terms of exposing your private information. Whereas with Bitgo, not being an exchange themselves, there is no real relationship of that sort with most people who would probably want to use a product like this. So in order to use this system, you are effectively forced to expose your private information to an additional party other than what you already would have, which is just not really ideal when you're talking about custody of your assets. And then really the next big thing here, it kind of interplays a little bit with these last two dynamics, but the entire rationale for this project is being able to use Bitcoin in Ethereum dApps or smart contracts, particularly decentralized exchanges. And like the logic here, it boggles my mind how they can think that this makes any kind of rational sense, because the entire, at least, argument behind something like a DEX, whether it's based on Bitcoin, Ethereum, counterparty, regardless of the underlying foundation it's built on, is that you are removing the counterparty custody risk, that you effectively maintain complete control over your funds until an atomic exchange with somebody else for some other asset or funds. And like, you are delusional if you think that a setup like this, and this to a degree also applies to Liquid or other such side chains that are built in the future, to call something an actual DEX, something that is completely peer-to-peer with zero custody risk, when you are literally just using a token printed out of thin air backed by something in another person's custody. Like, if the entire rationale for a DEX is I don't have to put my funds in somebody else's custody, this token does absolutely nothing whatsoever to facilitate Bitcoin being used in a DEX, because this is just a token that you're pretty much getting with the promise that turning it into Bitgo or whatever other custodians become involved in this platform will give you real Bitcoin for it. And like, just the mental gymnastics that have to be going on in people's heads to claim that this is actually creating some kind of value add or in any way enabling decentralized use of Bitcoin without custody risk in a decentralized exchange, it's just mind-boggling. And really, looking at Bitgo, looking at a few of these Ethereum companies and projects that are looking to get involved in this, honestly, this just looks to me like literally this is going to be Liquid's retarded little brother that is just trying to create this impression that there is some use for Ethereum, for these kinds of smart contracts, and just this broken, pointless nonsense that time and time again gets built on this platform. And it's completely ignoring the fact that there is absolutely no truly decentralized way to port Bitcoin onto Ethereum. Like, you have to have somebody in custody of these Bitcoin when you issue a token like this. And it's just like, this is just like the latest thing flailing around trying to justify Ethereum's existence. And it's really kind of hilarious because it's really gotten to the point where like the mindset is going, well, this platform is useless unless we can put Bitcoin on. And I'm sorry to say, but that's never going to happen. And the closest you might get is to attach it an equivalent to Bitcoin through something like Rootstock, but that is one pointless because the underlying dynamics here and like kind of smart contracts you can build with this are just pointless and broken. And two, you're not going to escape the need for custodians. Like, miners involved in custody of sidechain funds is not safe. And that leaves you with a federation, which just brings us right back to you're not building something that's truly decentralized, and trying to claim you are is just lying.
Yeah, man, I tell you, I was trying to write up some sort of like, flip it up in the artwork to where there was some Bitcoin being wrapped up in Ethereum paper and everything. It just couldn't put it together because, I mean, like, the story, it does seem pretty ridiculous in the sense that it's trying to, be like a Liquid competition. But I mean, if it's an ERC20 token, I mean, Liquid takes advantage of the two-way peg to Bitcoin. This is just an ERC20 that's got some amount of Bitcoin underlying underneath it. Is that what it's supposed to be? Because
yeah, and I mean that makes it a two-way peg of sorts, but it's just like the rationalization here that, well, that lets us put Bitcoin on a DEX. No, it doesn't. It lets you put a promissory note on a DEX. And see, that's where I kind of draw the line here between this and Liquid. Like, Liquid is not misrepresenting or trying to obscure the fact that, like, there is a group of trusted entities involved here. Like, this is not just like Bitcoin where there's no trust involved. Like, they're not trying to make claims like this, whereas this project very much is in the way that it's presenting itself.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I was flipping through their website and I kind of, quickly flipped out of there because it did look like just kind of a pumpy thing, sort of just like standard white paper websites we've seen before. I mean, minus a countdown ticker. It seemed pretty like, buzzwords. And like you're saying, I mean, yeah, the idea of it being a part of some actual DEX, I mean, yeah, this is just business as usual for the Ethereum guys. I mean, like the 0x guys, they claim all this is for decentralized exchanges and everything. But whenever you start talking about the issuance of these tokens and where they're coming from, that's where, I don't know, I usually get into a lot of headaches talking with some people because, they want to say that it's decentralized, but it's obviously not. I mean, it's got a centralized issuer and, yeah, I mean, it's like if they could just come out and at least say like what you're actually doing, especially a company like Bitgo that just got approval for some custodial solutions in South Dakota where they're actually working with law enforcement to build that sort of custodial solution out for a lot of different programs coming down the line, potentially seeing this custodial solution as an answer. And you see them talking like this with this wrapped BTC. it's from the last news, I was like, hey, Bitgo, coming out of nowhere, actually thinking about doing something useful in the space, and then this, yeah, it's I don't know, it's hard to tell where they stand really. Bitgo.
Well, it's just like the complete, like this is just contortion of logic to such an insane degree that, like, if you really look at this as anything but some weird equivalent of liquid that's misrepresenting itself, like, you need to stop investing in things in this space because you clearly are not capable of actually thinking them through in a rational way. All right, though. Or sorry, you got something to chime in, Nopar?
Indeed, I did. Please be especially kind to other contributors to the Bitcoin space when saying they made a mistake.
Don't just start cussing them out, Shinobi. That goes against the whole blog digest.
If you're a retard, you're a retard, and I'm going to call you fucking retard. Deal with
Oh, man. Jeez.
All right, though. Let us move along. So, there is some good news coming from the Lightning Network world. LND has made a series of merges that are starting to build out the functionality necessary for watchtowers. And like, by no means is this like, okay, watchtowers are actually here now, they're fully functional and working. But this is a decent chunk of work, really kind of taking steps towards that. So they've started kind of, first off, they built kind of what looks like a very bare bones implementation of the actual Watchtower server. So something to manage peer connections, receive state updates and penalty transactions, and a very simplistic database to kind of keep track of all of this. And then they've started fleshing out the peer-to-peer protocol for actually communicating with the Watchtower and exchanging information, so that you can kind of take the state and actually track that with incrementing numbers, so a Watchtower can make sure that the client is actually at the correct state when they make a connection to communicate updates. Actually, there was a little bit of discussion. Things are being set up so that you actually generate a new connection ID, I guess you could say, based on your Lightning node's pub key identity. And things are being set up in a way so that it kind of defaults to shutting down the connection during timeout or any kind of interference with that, with the assumption that the client can just reconnect. And this is, it looks like the kind of the logic in some of the pull requests is a little bit just trying to make sure that the ordering of communications between the peer and the Watchtower is actually correct and won't lead to kind of a falling out of sync in terms of which state the client and the Watchtower is on. And also thinking about denial of service attacks against the Watchtower, and not really wanting to set the protocol up in a way where a client can connect to a Watchtower and keep that connection open in a way that's constantly draining or using up Watchtower resources when they're not actually involved in any kind of state updates. But this is a pretty big step forward in terms of actually getting Lightning to the point where normal people can start using it, who aren't really just kind of blazing the trail and testing things to test things, or people who are actively tinkering around with things and trying to make improvements or build services or products themselves. Like, once this, I guess the way Roast Beef is putting it is the minimum viable product for a Watchtower is live, then we can actually start seeing end user wallets that would allow receiving of funds, and a much higher degree of certainty that your funds are going to be safe, even if you kind of shut things down and walk away for a while. And really, I think once that happens is really when things are going to start accelerating in terms of Lightning development, because we can actually put things out there. People building products and services can actually start seeing how normal people who aren't really just tinkering with Lightning to help build things out or develop things are actually going to interact with them and then really start fine tuning things. And, you know, the people actually building stuff can really look at how the normal user is going to interact with it and not just kind of speculate or, you know, just go off based on assumptions. Like there'll actually be a lot more potential for user feedback and to kind of see how they actually interact with this stuff. And I think that's really exciting. And yeah.
Yeah, man, I'm excited about this. You know, Lightning getting it to the point to where we can actually have, you know, just everyday people coming up and using some Bitcoin through Lightning Network, because you know, that's some of the major stuff we're trying to build out here as far as just having some point of sale for the cannabis industry where people could use it. And I mean, it would be a big advantage to have that sort of system being built in a way where, you know, we could sort of show other dispensaries in the area, like, look, this is something that can handle the transaction volume, and, you know, you can hold on to this underlying Bitcoin, and you can cash out whenever you want to. You don't have to deal with these crazy banking regulations and all this stuff here. And I mean, Watchtowers, that's a part of the system that's integral whenever you talk about people that are coming in and going out of the system that aren't necessarily going to be caring to hold on to Bitcoin or something. I mean, basically that just keeps the channels funded for anybody that wants to come into the system, correct? Like that keeps those channels moving, as far as somebody might not have a full amount to pay for something, but then that shores it up. Or how's exactly the Watchtowers go, man?
Pretty much what would happen, at least, you know, the most common way, because there's really a couple different ways to handle this, would be like when you update your state to the Watchtower, what you're going to do is just give them an output index or like just a part of a transaction ID, or potentially both from a commitment transaction. So you have the channel state, which is like the commitment and then the transactions giving everybody their money back. And then you have the output in the multi-sig on the main chain. And so until something's submitted to the chain, you don't really know anything about the transaction that's going to lead to everybody getting their money back. And so you get, or the Watchtower would get, either the output or part of the transaction ID to identify like a prior state, and then a penalty transaction that would use the revocation key and pretty much give you all of the funds from the channel plus a little bit of a fee in that revocation. And so like the most common model I've seen is effectively like you're kind of just constantly watching the chain, and if you see somebody about to get cheated, fixing that is like when you get paid, and you don't actually get paid until you do that.
Right. I know it's kind of like a little bit of an extra feature there in the way that it governs all these off-chain transactions. And I know that it's going to be helpful for just onboarding a bunch of people. But yeah, it's like, you know, that we've had a couple of these Lightning Hack Days now, and they just had the Lightning Hack Day NYC, and all this stuff is moving so fast. It's, oh man, I wish I could just like dive into it and delve into it, because it's moving quick, man. That's a lot of, I mean, the Watchtower's implementation is just this is just like a spec for one of the implementations as far as the code that just got released.
Well, yeah, this is just like the minimal like product to actually get it working out the door for people to use. You know, there's a lot of different ways you could do this. I mean, like, I don't think this will ever really catch on, but like you could stream Satoshis to a Watchtower to like pay them for constantly watching, although that's, to me, is not really the most viable way. You could count on, you know, just people doing it altruistically, which, you know, I think with enough Watchtowers that could work, but I still don't think that's really a good way to handle that in the long term for large amounts of people. Or you could just do like the most commonly discussed way, which is literally just the Watchtower gets paid a little bit out of the penalty transaction they have. So when they see something that they have a penalty transaction for, they're actually economically incentivized to submit that to the network and make sure that you're not cheated.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see it actually, get built out to where, like you're saying, we can see how the system's going to function and, see who's running these watchtowers and how exactly they're being run and all that. I mean, it's something we'll see in due time.
Yeah, I mean, like there's even like other ideas. Like for instance, you could do an anyone can spend output or something like that. But the issue with that though is, let's say a watchtower goes to submit a transaction like that, and then claim the anybody can spend themselves. Well, any miner that mines it could just ignore that and spend it to themselves, and because they're the miner and they decide what goes in the block, like there's really nothing that a non-mining watchtower could do about that. And like, while it's kind of interesting in that it's more flexible, I don't really like the idea of kind of concentrating things like that around miners, like especially when it involves like the security of people's funds.
We can just wait for like 10 years until everyone's smartphone is connected all the time, and we won't need to have watchtowers and friction like this.
Well, yeah, I mean, like every aspect of the network, in my opinion, is just only going to get better the more connected and powerful mobile devices get. But I mean, in the meantime, we need to have some kind of stopgap. All right, though.
But does it set a good precedent?
Yeah, I mean, we can always like move away from things on second layers like that, or do them in a different way. You know what I mean? It's not like the base layer. Like we don't have to get into a tug of war, a fight over something like a consensus rule. It's just, okay, I'm going to start doing this instead. And you can do whatever you want. I don't care. All right, though. I don't know. Any more input on this, or should we pass it off to Rick?
Yeah, I mean, just final comment on that, like, that wrap Bitcoin and, liquid lightning. Yeah, it's like, now there's like all these other forks and everything. It's like, yeah, if you want to do something, you pretty much have the ability to go do it now. I mean, as far as like different places to develop. But yeah, let's get into this story from China. Just this past week, China had something to say about Bitcoin, or at least an arbitrator who interprets Chinese law said something about Bitcoin, and that got us all pretty riled up. So this made some pretty big waves when the news broke, and it's pretty big in the fact that we do gain a little more insight of the legalities of Bitcoin in China. Now, flashback to about this time last year, we had already heard China bans Bitcoin to the point that we became numb to it, became a meme and everything. However, last year we know there was that decision handed down that had some actual enforcement behind it. And, since then we haven't really had a good idea of where Bitcoin stands in the eye of the Chinese government or Chinese law. We saw them crack down real hard on exchanges and miners to the point that a lot of businesses left the area, pretty much all of them. And since the last ban, it's been hard to tell where Bitcoin stands in China until now. So like I said earlier, there was a disagreement among this was all handled in the, what is this? The Shenzhen Court of International Arbitration. So, there was a disagreement among parties there in China who had some cryptos and a contract on how to manage those, but they came into a little bit of a disagreement. That's where this Shenzhen Court of International Arbitration came into the picture to clear it up. And just go ahead and give a big shout out to Catherine Wu, a cryptocurrency researcher at Messari, who translated and interpreted this story for the community, because without someone like her, we'd still be wondering what all this means. it's real hard to get the news from over there and get it over here, and so someone like her is real valuable. So yeah, shout out to Catherine Wu for all this help on this. So the reason why Bitcoin was the topic of discussion is because of a disagreement among three parties. A situation where one party held private keys to a little over 20 Bitcoin, 50 Bitcoin Cash, and a little over 12 Bitcoin Diamond. So this party with the private keys was working with another individual in a partnership. On top of the private keys, they were also holding about 550,000 in shares from this partnership, and which he had paid back 250,000. And once the price rise happened, the individual without the private keys offered to pay the remaining 300,000 for those partnership shares in exchange for the keys, so they could actually be in possession of some of the assets. But however, after the amount was paid back, the party with the private keys refused to return those assets back, which led to this arbitration. And the defendant in that says that the contract should be void because ICOs are illegal. And however, in the arbitrator's view, the circulation and payment of Bitcoin is not illegal. Bitcoin does not have the same rights as fiat, but that does not mean that holding or paying with cryptos is illegal. And the second point from the arbitrator on that discussion was that Bitcoin lives in the digital world and has different characteristics than fiat, but that does not stop it from being a form of payment. And their third point was just because Bitcoin is not a legally recognized currency doesn't mean that as property, it should not be afforded legal protection. And this was a quote from the arbitrator saying, the party contends that Bitcoin has characteristics of property or store value, can be controlled by the owner, and has economic value to the owner. It does not break any laws, and this arbitrator agrees. So in that, it looks like over in China, there might be, those heavy-handed regulations on the exchanges and mining aspects of Bitcoin, but the handling of Bitcoin as a payment mechanism and as property seems to be in good standing and legally protected by the Chinese government, at least according to this arbitrator, which is interpreting this Chinese law. So, that could open the door for more people to start doing business again in China as far as with Bitcoin. However, I wouldn't be surprised if the crowd waits to hear something a little more official from the government themselves. Like you're saying, it really kind of made some waves, and, there might be a little bit of a misunderstanding as far as who exactly in China is saying Bitcoin's okay. But, this is somebody who interprets the law. So I imagine some people are going to take this as a cue and say, like, well, this guy's interpreting the laws to say that it's favorable for me to still accept Bitcoin. So we might start seeing some more people over there in China start to accept Bitcoin and, hold on to Bitcoin without the fear of worrying if it's just illegal to possess it. And, that's just something where we haven't really heard any clarity on the picture from China. So I think it's good to get this news out, but yeah, what you guys think about it as far as China and Bitcoin and how things are going over there? Is this like, pretty significant as far as the way things were last year, or is this just like something, we'll wait and see?
I don't know. I honestly am not going to look at this as like some huge earth-shattering precedent or anything. I mean, it's really...
But think about the merchants in China. Like, what do they think? Like, I'm sure they're a little bit happier to hear about this.
Well, I mean, it's like China isn't like they're not really of the mindset like fuck blockchain, fuck Bitcoin, kill it all. What they want to do, from everything I've seen over the last year or two, is just limit their citizens' ability to use it to bypass capital controls. Like, I don't think they care that it exists or that people have it. They just don't want it to become a huge like vehicle for wealth flight. Like, a lot of people like, a lot of people look at the real estate markets in places like Vancouver and just think, oh, the evil Chinese, like they're fucking up like our real estate markets. But like on the flip side of that, most of the time that is like middle class or somewhat wealthy Chinese people trying to get their money out of China so that they can leave China. And a country like a communist state like that does not want their citizens to have easy access to just pick up their wealth and leave, because the more people who do that, like the weaker their influence is, the less economic relevance they have, and it just makes it harder and harder to really hold on to control. So I don't really think that they care too much that it's just like, well, people have this thing. They just don't want this thing to be used in that specific way.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's like I'm just thinking about even like the U.S. government. It's like, you know, they're not saying like there's a ban on it. It's like, but you know, they want to make sure that they know who you are and like what you're doing whenever you're getting into the system. And I imagine, yeah, China doesn't really want that whole system to expand any more than it already has. Especially like you're saying, I mean, it'd be very easy to move that value out of the system over there. So, I mean, yeah, I kind of agree with you there. Like, you know, they probably just don't really care that it's in some people's hands, as long as they can kind of stem the growth of it and stem the fact that anybody in, I guess, their citizenry has it and know who has it so that they could keep them in country. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's hard to tell. I mean, like you're saying, I was saying, like most of the Chinese stories came out like this time last year, and you know, yeah, it was like a China bans Bitcoin, and then you're not allowed to leave China because you've been working in Bitcoin. And then, I mean, like I think for at least the people on the ground there, the merchants there that have been holding Bitcoin and kind of maybe been having a little bit of a sweaty brow about it, you know, kind of worried about whether or not this is something they are able to hold on to. I mean, at least that kind of puts that that worry down for them. But like you're saying, as far as like whether it's going to be a big deal for China and Bitcoin, probably not. Probably, like you're saying, you're going to have to wait for a little bit more of an official word that says like, yeah, it's okay to set up an exchange, and here's like the process to do that, or you know, here's a process within the current construct in China to make that all okay and be above board. So yeah, we'll see how it goes, how it plays out. I mean, it's just an update from China, and we haven't heard anything from them in a while. So,
No, Paris. So you've been to Taiwan, right? Do you think that Taiwan is an independent country or part of China?
I've been in both. I've been in both China and Taiwan too, and I don't know about China. It's so strange. Everything is changing all the time. Generally, in China, they let things go. They don't take preemptive measures. They let things go until something breaks, until Bitcoin becomes a real issue for them, and then they clamp down on it. I think that's what's going to happen eventually. I mean, come on, let's not think that Bitcoin can fly in China. It's not gonna happen.
But
it should be.
But see, this is kind of what I mean when I say like they don't want to kill it, because like China for like the past 10, maybe 20 years has been like stockpiling the shit out of gold and like moving to actually have some kind of hard backing for their currency and a lot of actual commodity reserves. And something like Bitcoin, like they can't kill it. Like they can't kill it globally. So they're going to want to have some kind of exposure to it in case it does become something hugely important globally. Like they're just not going to want to let their citizens use it directly. You know what I mean?
At this point, they don't care. But there is a difference between gold and Bitcoin, though, because in gold, it's okay if gold is going into China, that's fine. They can prevent gold going out of China by just border control. But how would they prevent Bitcoin going out of China? You know what I mean? So I think that's not a good comparison.
They're not
Well,
really
simple. Don't let people with Bitcoin go out of China.
They tried that, right? I mean, like, yeah, I'm just thinking about, they're not really stopping these people from going and buying real estate in these other countries. I mean, like, and I mean, like, I guess in a sense that's kind of spreading their geographic power, though, not so much as like letting someone out of the country. Like, I mean, it seems like a lot of that real estate has been gobbled. I mean, like, I know that there's like parts of the United States that are just like all Chinese factory towns because they own so much of the land there. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's I imagine that they would want to do some sort of like speculation on it to try and at least, like you're saying, you know, play it on the way up and try to play their cards right. And because I mean, like, yeah, I mean, when it comes to the current system of things, I mean, you know, the petrodollar kind of rules the day. So I mean, like, it's something else, right? It's something that's not that. And I don't know, this whole story a little bit later on with India, I think that's got a little bit to do with India and China, where it's like, you know, they're both trying to see each other's stance on Bitcoin before they really like let it out, I guess. But that's just my own speculation.
Alrighty then. Janine, would you like to take this one and give me a chance to silently punch the wall with my mic muted?
Yeah, so you may have heard us, especially Shinobi, cover the allegations of insider trading and market manipulation against Coinbase by multiple people, including a guy named Jeffrey Burke, who filed a class action lawsuit in March of this year. And there's another class action lawsuit, at least one more, I don't know of any others, in the Southern District of Florida from Silver Miller on behalf of plaintiffs who have additional allegations besides insider trading, such as undelivered and unclaimed funds, platform breakdowns that led to significant investment loss, and unexplained or unwarranted account freezes. I think the article in Bitcoin Magazine that we cite in the show notes, it mistakenly said that this one was also in California, but actually it's in Florida. So just small correction on that. In December 2017, right after the rollout of Bcash, which was the event that preceded the allegations of insider trading, we had Jack and Bill Mullers on episode 65 to talk about the insider trading allegations and how that might affect the CME. And then in July this year, we also reported on Coinbase's internal investigation, the results of it, in episode 116. I think the title was Coinbase Finds Coinbase is Innocent. And now a couple days ago, Vince, I think you pronounce it Vince Chabria, a United States district judge for the Northern District of California since March 2014, granted a motion to dismiss the class action lawsuit from Jeffrey Burke on the basis that, quote, Burke's complaint does not sufficiently articulate the legal basis for his claims. Taking Burke's negligence claim as an example, Burke fails to describe the scope or content of Coinbase's duty in anything more than general or broad generalities. A reader of the complaint is thus left wondering what Coinbase should have done differently or why the rollout of Bitcoin Cash would have gone more smoothly had Coinbase done whatever Burke thinks is appropriate, end quote. He also states that, quote, Burke has a private right of action under the CEA, which is, let me check what that is really quick because I just forgot my acronyms. The CEA is, where did it go? Commodity Exchange Act. So I guess that was the claim he was making it under. Let me go back. So he has a private right of action under the CEA only if he used Coinbase to make a contract of sale of a commodity for future delivery, in other words, a futures contract. Because Burke used Coinbase to purchase Bitcoin Cash rather than to make a contract to purchase Bitcoin Cash at a specific date in the future, he cannot maintain a claim under the CEA. And he also says that Burke, etc., whoever else is a request that the court partly or entirely throw out the case on the basis that it is not legally valid. And it seems like I was looking up various ways that a motion to dismiss would be granted, and it looks like he's mainly going for insufficient. Let me see. Probably, like he says in that quote, I think it's like insufficient justification or legal justification. And also, I think he also mentioned that there was some stuff with it's a bunch of legalese that most of it I don't understand regarding the arbitration part, but I guess this judge is saying that his interpretation of the arbitration clause was not correct or something, or it was incomplete, or Coinbase didn't state it correctly. But I think that he might have also been saying that the plaintiff in this case, Jeffrey Burke, is not giving, he's not explaining how Coinbase, as he says, could have done this differently. And so how can they grant relief or, yeah. So basically that's his excuses for filing this motion to dismiss. And there's no news on whether that affects the other class action lawsuit, because that's in a different state. So not sure what happened yet with that one. I don't think there's been any news on whether that's, I think it's still just pending. But yes. So this one might be dismissed if they don't file a amended complaint within 21 days from October 23rd, which would be sometime in the middle of November.
Jeez, man. Yeah, it's, I mean, you know, I read this as like, God, that just sort of like, I kind of can imagine that's exactly what would happen with Coinbase, the way that they, you know, they're cozy with regulators, cozy with lobbyers. They just recently started their own little lobbying firm with Circle and Digital Currency Group. And Florida, a Florida judge, of course, you know, I mean, like, I mean, that place is pretty notorious for having like lots of, I mean, everywhere in the country is pretty screwed up when it comes to insider trading and all that. But Florida is like kind of set itself apart when it comes to all sorts of legal hangups and trying to get people either stuck in the system or out of the system. And yeah, I mean, it's just kind of upsetting because it is like, what evidence do you bring? And like, and when you bring that evidence, is it sufficient enough to where a judge is actually going to look at the case and take it? Because I mean, like, yeah, I mean, this is kind of the way that business is run, is you know, insider trading.
Yeah, just to clarify really quick, I mean, I think all of what you just said about Florida is true regardless, but so what I meant to say is that this case is in the Northern District of California, and then there's another class action lawsuit out of Florida, which I think Bitcoin Magazine mistakenly located. So this is not a Florida judge, he's in the Northern District of California.
They got to go to Wyoming or South Dakota, one of these places that's actually trying to make a name for themselves. These traditional places where people file lawsuits are not going to help them. I'm sorry, quick.
Mm-hmm. But like, this is like just beyond absurd. I mean, like, they need to like reformulate their shit and get this back again, because this case being dismissed would just be beyond absurd. Like, as far as what they could have done differently, well, here's one thing. Actually, you know, have some material way to enforce shit with your employees in terms of outside information leakages. Like, you know, secondly, you know, maybe amend public statements with a long lead time before actually listing something, when your last statement on the matter was that you will not be engaging in supporting trading of any kind whatsoever, simply enabling the withdrawal of this asset off of your platform. And then surprise, trading literally out of nowhere with no heads up, no notice, no update to the previous statement. You will not be supporting trading of any kind, when a large number of people in this ecosystem can attest for a fact that this information was leaked out of Coinbase a day or two prior, and you can see that reflected in the markets. A shit ton of things. Like, if this suit gets thrown out, then pretty much like fuck Coinbase. Like, I will make it my personal mission to destroy their reputation in every way that I possibly can. Because like this will be the final nail in the coffin where it's demonstrated that the US government has decided that they are effectively going to let this one business do whatever the fuck they want, regardless of the legality, regardless of regulations, simply because of their ties to people in the Justice Department, people in the fucking banking sector, the fucking stock markets, like this whole fucked up legacy revolving door dynamic that they've pretty much perfectly replicated in the crypto ecosystem.
Whew. I'm with you on it, man. I'm just saying, like, today's day, we might have to be wary of some, code of conduct hand down notice or something, or takedown, because, they do all that backdoor shenanigans. So, I mean, like, yeah, it's something that definitely needs to see a better court. I think that, yeah, they should reformulate it. I think they should bring it to Wyoming, because Wyoming seems to have set up the best laws and legal structure for when it comes to how to set up an exchange and what crypto, as far as like Bitcoin and tokens, is labeled as, and like there's actually some legal framework to work there. And I think that state has an incentive to get it right. But yeah, well, yeah, they should definitely reformulate this.
Well, if they were to move it to Wyoming, they would first have to find a customer who not only was using Coinbase, but could make the same claim that Jeffrey Burke is making, or perhaps a stronger case. Because, I mean, the reason it's happening in Northern California is because I believe that's where Jeffrey lives, and that's why it's going to that court. Unless they're doing it based on where Coinbase is based, but that probably isn't the case. So they would only be able to move it to Wyoming if they found someone in the class action lawsuit who could be the main plaintiff.
I bet you somebody from Wyoming was.
Yeah, but fuck Coinbase, fuck Brian Armstrong, and if this case gets dismissed, fuck the state of California. So what was that you had to say? Something about being nice and polite, Nopara, or something like that.
Please do not take harsh tone towards other participants in the Bitcoin space.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Shinobi just violated that by telling an entire state to fuck off.
Especially don't make personal attacks against them. Go
Uh-oh.
out of your way to show that you are criticizing a statement, not a person, not
Uh-oh.
Brian Armstrong.
So what is this from again, Nopara?
Should I start my story? Did you finish bashing Coinbase?
Go.
Yes.
All right. So the man himself, Richard Stallman, who is he? The Pope of the Church of Emacs, put out GNU kind communication guidelines, which I found really interesting. So the backstory is there that in the Linux world there is some news, some stuff about the code of conducts and stuff like that, like Linus Torvalds, the maintainer, the creator and maintainer of the Linux kernel, left the development, and because he recognized that he was too harsh to other people and he has to work on himself, how to handle kindly other people, things like that. He's back a couple of days ago. He come back. So anyway, this is the context, and Richard Stallman published kind communication guidelines, which was really interesting. There were some general blah blah, like Please assume other participants are posting in good faith. Please think about how to treat other participants with respect. Please do not take harsh tone towards other participants. Please, 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 a lot of please. Like, you know what? I count it. 17, please. Anyway. So yeah, we could create a blog digest kind communication guidelines and look how that works out. But there were some useful tips. I really liked it because I very often get into a situation I couldn't handle, and I want to read them, and maybe you guys can talk about it. So one of the tips I found useful, there will be two. If in a discussion someone brings a tangent to the topic at hand, please keep the discussion on track by focusing on the current topic rather than the tangent. This is not to say the tangent is bad or not interesting to discuss, only that it shouldn't interfere with the discussion of the issue at hand. In most cases, it is also an off-topic, so those interested ought to discuss it somewhere else. This is one thing what I think could be pretty useful when you're talking with Roger Ver, because he's very often changing the topics when he feels he doesn't have a good argument. Yeah. So that was one. Well, how do you handle when someone's changing topics? How do you guys?
I usually call them a fucking idiot and tell them to pull their head out of their ass and keep their brain on topic.
All right, so you just
Shinobi.
you just complied to this rule.
You just violate.
That's not addressing their statement, though. You have to address the statement, not the person.
This has nothing to do with what we're talking about, dumb fuck.
What? Okay,
I'm putting what do you put on the fire? Anyway, whatever.
Gasoline.
So the next one and the last one I want to talk about is really interesting. Rather than trying to have the last word, look for the times when there is no need to reply, perhaps because you already made the relevant point clear enough. If you know something about the game of Go, do you know what is the game of Go?
Yeah.
All right. If you know something about the game of Go, this analogy might clarify that. When other players' move is not strong enough to require a direct response, it is advantageous to give it none and instead move elsewhere. Oh my god, if I would keep this, I would save so much time.
Well, I just want to say that I'm kind of surprised that something like this was posted by Richard Stallman, because as much as I like my favorite part of his website when you go to it is where he makes this whole list of all the things that you shouldn't use and why you shouldn't use it because it's not free software or it's evil, like Skype and all of that. But Richard Stallman is not a stranger to shall we say, people saying that his behavior is erratic or strange or inappropriate at times. So I'm kind of surprised that Richard Stallman was the person to post this, because he doesn't actually conform to a lot of social conventions.
Oh, there is a point about this too. Likewise, be kind when pointing out to other contributors that they should stop using certain non-free software. For their own sake, they ought to free themselves.
What? Okay. That one's most unexpected.
But Mama said Windows is the devil.
But we welcome their contributions to our software packages, even if they don't do that. So these reminders should be gentle and not too frequent. Don't nag. This guy is you know, all of you are violating Richard Stallman's point because you are watching this on YouTube.
Microsoft is the devil.
Yeah, it sounds like Stallman had a little bit of a waking moment where he said, like, okay, I'm a little bit he must have had something happen in development where he was like, okay, I went about this the total wrong way, and then just had like I need to reformulate the way that I work with people, and then decided that it was going to be a good newsletter to post.
So it was an open source project started to post code of conduct, and then he thought, oh, maybe it's better if we are posting not code of conduct, not like a rule, but kind communication guidelines. Yeah, so that's the context there.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like all this stuff, kind communication guidelines, terms of service, code of conduct. It really is just like, yeah, it's another way to try and censor, really. I mean, like, it just seems like it is the way to censor now as far as trying to keep people quiet. It's like, okay, well, we'll just keep them off of this platform because of a violation of some sort of guideline or terms of service or code of conduct. And I mean, I don't think it's helpful for development at all. I mean, like, I think it is helpful to be kind in your discussions, to be productive in them and not just let them sour. But the idea that, you know, I don't know, just like most of these, I feel like is being used to try and censor speech. And that's where, I mean, like, I don't know if it's really to try and help development as much as it might be used for that in the future.
I mean, that was the whole idea, that he said other code of conduct are using this to set rules. He's putting this out to, well, if someone wants to follow these things, then go ahead. They might be good conversational strategies, you know.
I'll make a concession, Nopara. I will follow all of these suggestions if the person I'm talking to is not a fucking dumbass.
I mean, we don't believe you, but
Right.
Yeah, I just want to point out, I want to list off when you go to his personal website, stallman.org, it's like he has, it says Richard Stallman's personal site. It has a link to the Giving Guide at the Free Software Foundation. Then it has a bunch of like tags for different blog posts he has. And then right below that, it says what's bad about, and then it's a whole list of things, which includes Amtrak, like, because you'd think, oh, it's only going to be like non-free software stuff, but no, it's like Amtrak, Pay Toilets, Wendy's, Patreon, Lyft. Like, what does he say about Pay Toilets? Why are Pay Toilets bad? Pay Toilets are nasty and ought to be illegal. Those of us who are not poor can afford the price if we accept the practice. Poor people can't. To deny people access to a toilet when they need one is nasty and degrading. I've concluded that the least we can do to eliminate pay toilets is to avoid giving them money. Instead of paying them, I go to great lengths to find some other toilet. Please join me in rejecting pay toilets firmly.
no way.
That's literally what he has on his. So yeah, I don't know. That seems pretty forceful, and I don't know. I think pretty much everyone who has met Richard Stallman, if you bring up any of these things and a bunch of other things that's not free software, he will tell you immediately that you should stop using it. So I don't know if he's following his own guidelines or if he's stopped doing that, but
I want to know where these paid toilets are. I've never paid for a toilet.
Germany. I didn't get
yeah,
public-
Europe, a lot of, yeah. Although it's so funny because the pay toilet, one of them, I think the cheapest one I found was like, was it 50 cents? I think that was the cheapest one I've ever seen. It was 50 cents, and they are awful. Pay toilets are absolutely
It's still awful. Oh man, I'd poor toilet. I
There-
usually
the-
scored
the-
about 3
the-
of these.
The 50-cent one, I was in there for about 15 minutes because I couldn't find the handle to flush it because they had it in a weird spot. It wasn't on whatever. It was just some of them are really poorly designed.
Come on, guys. It's a bathroom. We need to get these things right.
You know, in Taiwan, once I went to the toilet and there was a lady cleaning it, and I thought that she was I wanted to give her money because of the toilet. Of course, but she didn't
I'm sorry,
understand.
lady.
Why am I giving her money?
Feel bad about it.
All right. That's about kind communication guidelines.
Alrighty. So next up, I guess, I do have to say, Jeannie, I'm kind of surprised that you didn't want to talk about this one or take head on it. But a Mr. Corin Faif, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, from Breaker Mag, decided to perform a scientific experiment on media publications in the cryptocurrency space. And so what he did is made a fake Gmail using a random picture of a Russian actor, and it used the fake name Nikolai Kostarev, with no other website, no domain, no even a made-up company name, and started emailing a number of major publications in the ecosystem to ask them if they would publish a coverage of an ICO for money. And obviously, you're probably going to get a different response if you just go, "Hey,
No,
can you-"
you're missing the point. It was a coverage of an ICO as a not sponsored content. That's
Well,
what.
yeah, but it's the point is like he slowly kind of built up to this in his communications. Like he first emailed and pretty much requested the rates for advertising on the website, and got a lot of responses back because this is not too out of the ordinary. Like pretty much all of these publications perform advertisements, and then in a follow-up reply to the responses he got to that, he then asked if they would be okay with pretty much publishing things that were not marked as sponsored. And from this point on, let's just say the mainstream media is not the only thing you need to worry about in terms of a complete lack of any ethics whatsoever. Out of the 22 outlets that he contacted, 12 of them were willing to publish paid content without disclosing that it was paid. And I believe 2 others hinted without explicitly stating that they would be willing to do so. So that brings it up to 14. And yeah, pretty much the prices ranged anywhere from a few $100s to up to $4,000, depending on how big the publication was. And so just a quick rundown here. Crypto Ninjas, Cointelligence, CoinSpeaker, Crypto Potato, Blocked, BTC Manager, Coin Idol, AMB Crypto, Global Coin Report, CryptoVest, Bitcoinist, which I am pretty disappointed in, and News BTC all effectively said that they would be okay with posting paid for content without any disclaimers whatsoever that it was paid content. And that was in the order of the cheapest rate to the most expensive at the end. And really the real cherry on the top here for me is they reached out to Cointelegraph as one of them. And while Cointelegraph while they stated they wouldn't publish such content on Cointelegraph itself, they directly referred them to members of the, what is it called?
News group.
The Cointelegraph news group, which is part of how they got in contact with Bitcoinist, News BTC. And so while they were unwilling to do so directly, they referred them to companies that would. And yeah, so that's literally half of the fucking companies contacted more were willing to shill an ICO for money without any disclaimer whatsoever that there was any kind of financial motive or relationship behind their coverage of this. And one thing I do want to point out, these publications, and you will probably be seeing a lot less in terms of sources from the ones who were willing to do this and a lot more from the ones who won't. Publications that refused outright to do this: Brave New Coin, Coin Journal, Cryptos Rus, CCN, Mineable, The Oracle Times, and Zycrypto. So to those publications, thank you for actually having a fucking backbone and integrity, because we have enough issues in the mainstream media with just complete horseshit being thrown around everywhere. That's bad enough. We don't need this kind of attitude and behavior infecting the more crypto oriented shit as well. So yeah, this is about how much you can trust a lot of the publications in this ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really not surprised by the results. I am surprised that Cointelegraph wasn't among the companies that, or the news agencies that were willing to do that, because I would definitely suspect them of doing stuff like that. Because they're one of the still more popular crypto news outlets that I don't know why their popularity is justified anymore, because I've very, 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 very rarely ever read an article from them that was even worth reading in the first place. Not surprised that a bunch of the other, like some of them I've never even heard of, so it doesn't surprise me that they're basically really desperate for money and they're willing to do unethical things in order to get that money. Yeah, definitely does not surprise me. This is why yeah, I don't read a lot of these crypto news sites because I mean some of them are a lot better at sourcing, besides this about, promoting ICOs and not labeling it with the right disclaimers. But to be honest, most of them are guilty of not sourcing claims correctly. And I bet that most of the content is paid or sponsored anyway, even if they do have a disclaimer. So, yeah.
Why did he not contact CoinDesk?
Yeah, why didn't he contact CoinDesk?
I actually don't explicitly see any comment on whether he did or did not contact CoinDesk.
Because he worked there. That's the reason. But what if he contacted it?
Oh
and
boy.
didn't get the desired result?
Oh, so this whole thing was just supposed to be a PR boost for CoinDesk and be like, oh, look at us. All of these other news outlets are shit, and we're doing great because we're not even included in the study because the person who wrote it did not even wait. Did he actually disclaim that he works at CoinDesk?
Yeah.
Did he include a disclaimer? Okay, so he's not. So
He at least did that.
Yeah. Okay. Good. But yeah, still should have included CoinDesk in that, because that would have been really funny if he tricked his own employer into divulging the fact that they do that.
And this is where it's like, honestly, like I kind of see, like I'm upset with some of them, like, Bitcoinist, like you're saying, like that one, and News BTC. I mean, it seems like those guys, did a little bit of investigating in some of those articles that we had covered. It seemed like they were on top of things. And then there was like a couple of times I flipped on their website looking for news, and I was just really kind of taken back on like, what is all this crap that they're publishing? But I get it kind of. It's like journalism and writing news stories is not exactly anything that's good in a business decision as far as making money. I mean, like there's the advertising model, which sucks. And then there's the sponsored content model, which sucks. And I mean, really, it takes kind of like a financier and people that are wanting to do the right thing ethically in order to actually create real journalism, which, yeah, it puts people in a bind. Like somebody like this guy writing for CoinDesk. It's like, is he really going to do the due diligence and go to CoinDesk? That's his employer. That's the guy writing his paycheck. So, I mean, it's like, it's upsetting, but I kind of get it. But it's a good piece of news to digest and say, okay, I'm not going to look at this brand or this website the same way I did before this news, and just sort of, lets us get a clearer picture of where we stand with information and where it's coming from.
Yeah, I just also want to note that it probably also matters on a lot that who you contact, who reads your letter, right? Different employees might have different answers, so let's just keep that in mind.
No.
I figured that.
That's another thing, Nopara. One of the companies, let me see this real quick.
Yeah, until you're trying to find it, I just want to say that I was contacted by ICOs a lot, but lately I did not. I was actually even I was actually even putting a list that, hey, when did which ICO contacted, and in the last 2 months no one contacted me. So ICOs are over.
Okay. The editor-in-chief of Bitcoinist reached out to them after they published this article and said all sponsored content is clearly labeled as such in some form. The fee to remove the sponsored category tag merely helps the article stay on top longer and removes it from a pool of sponsored content within that group. It always carries a disclaimer of some sort. He also said that, then the the CEO of News BTC said that a member of the sales team mistakenly suggested that we could publish content without disclosing that it has been paid for. This is not our policy. The person who said this has been let go from the company, is no longer working here, blah, blah, blah. And they were then pressed for any kind of evidence that the staff member had been removed and fired, and pointed out that they had a second source that spoke to New BTC's willingness to do this kind of thing, and then they immediately stopped talking to them.
Ouch.
So, yeah. Let's just say I am going to be going out of my way to never use any of these sources willing to do this ever again.
Yeah, and shout out again to those that didn't.
All right, though. Who's ready for some juicy gossip?
How juicy is it? I don't know if I can handle it.
Well, I would say with a very high degree of likelihood, Bitfinexed has been doxxed. So Think Exclamation has posted a piece up on Steemit, and because Steemit is a giant pile of shit, we have the archive link in the show notes, and you can use that to go look at the actual article if you are so inclined. Has very likely identified Bitfinexed, a man, Spencer McDonald from Homestead, Florida. And while it is a decent amount of circumstantial evidence, I'd say the case is pretty strong. And frankly, before I go into all of this, let me put it this way. Doxing is not cool, but in order to not get doxed, that responsibility is on you. to maintain your OPSEC, to maintain your disconnection from things. This is the real world. This is the internet, and that's just the lay of the land. And secondly, in the instance of somebody like Bitfinexed, who has clearly been spewing horseshit, specifically attacking large financial entities and intentionally trying to cause financial harm to a large number of people based on complete horseshit, I could really give a fuck that he got doxxed. One, you fucked up the responsibility in maintaining your OPSEC. And two, you've been a manipulative, deceptive piece of shit. And frankly, I could give two fucks that this happened. So, moving onwards, there are numerous quotes of Bitfinexed referring to EVE Online and making the specific claim that he would target Chinese miners, as in space miners, something you can do in the game for income, and would occasionally get an email from them after destroying them, Sini Ma, which I believe translates to fuck your mother. And Mr. Spencer's account, Vugru, on Reddit, is referring to this exact same thing. This reminds him of when he used to blow up Chinese miners, parentheses exactly like Bitfinex, explaining that it is a profession in this game, and would get an email from them with this exact quote. So, let's move along to the next one and keep in mind that this is circumstantial. But both of these accounts have a very long history of mentioning EVE Online. Both of them have a very long history of being critical and attacking Tether and Bitfinex. And this goes on for quite a long time. Second piece, both of them have frequently used the phrase boom, done in the ending of just commentary on things they're being critical of. There's just plenty of examples of Bitfinex doing this. And the specific example quoted in this of the Vogru account is actually specifically in a post regarding shitting all over Tether. Okay. Third piece. Both of them, again, in speaking specifically about Tether, have used the phrase worthless car wash tokens, and generally within pretty close timing. All right, fourth piece of evidence. Both of them have referred to Social Security in the United States as the Social Security Trust Us Fund. And this is where it gets just a little too much to write off as circumstantial. Google returns exactly 2 results for this specific phrase through their entire search index. That is posted by Bitfinexed and posted by the Vogru account. Last piece of evidence, they're both frequently mentioning being a managed IT provider working remotely. In Bitfinex's case, justifying why he has so much free time to shit all over Tether and Bitfinex. And yeah, so especially this Social Security Trust Us Fund incident, which there's literally 2 instances, just these 2 accounts that have been indexed by Google's search engine, which I don't need to explain is one of the most comprehensive, deep-reaching search indexes on the internet. All of these things kind of move to paint a picture of these accounts being ran by the same person. And the real interesting thing, the cherry on top, the finale here, is a man named Stephen Pally, who is a lawyer in Florida, who was hired by Bitfinexed when he started crying about an imaginary lawsuit from Bitfinex for defamation that never happened, was never filed, and started collecting donations from the community to defend himself against this imaginary lawsuit from Bitfinex. Well, this man, Stephen Pally, and this entire lawsuit incident happened around the time that Bitfinex and Tether were getting subpoenas by the CFTC. Well, Pally has gone on a number of times in different podcasts in the ecosystem. With a man, one instance with a man, Jeff Bandman, who he is actually pretty good friends with. And who is Jeff Bandman? Wow. He was a senior official in the CFTC from 2014 through 2017. Was actually the fintech advisor to Chairman Giancarlo, was the founding director of Lab CFTC, the CFT's hub for engaging with fintech matters and companies. He established and chaired the CFTC blockchain and virtual currency and fintech working group. He led the fintech coordination with domestic international regulators. He joined the CFTC as a special counsel to Chairman Timothy G. Masad, and then led the CFTC's Office of International Affairs. He led the CFT's Division of Clearing and Risk, which is, is anybody kind of looking at all these things here? All the relation to the blockchain cryptocurrency ecosystem, all of these things he's been chairman of that specifically deal with international clearing risks and compliance with international regulations. And wow, isn't it really funny how there's literally just 2 hops from Bitfinexed, the guy who's been screaming his lungs out about Tether being printed out of thin air, Bitfinex running fractional reserve, all kinds of baseless, crazy shit with zero evidence, to the CFTC, a United States federal regulatory agency who was crawling all over this company's ass and very well might still be. Hmm.
Well, do you think this guy is Bitfinex, or is it still a consortium of banks, a conglomerate of banks? Like that's where I was like kind of like, oh man, it's a little upsetting.
No, I would say with a very high degree of certainty that it is this guy, and he actually is probably the reason that the CFTC even went into all of the actions and subpoenas that they gave to Tether and Bitfinex, especially looking at this relationship with a lawyer who's very closely tied and friends with a member with that deep of an involvement with the CFTC, and specifically the CFTC's actions in the cryptocurrency ecosystem, being a direct channel of communication for him to pretty much flood shit tons of his accusation and air quote evidence into the CFTC's hand with almost no critical analysis or pushback or counterpoints, because it's all moving through a back channel.
Yeah, and when I was reading this, I was kind of just like upset about it, because I was like, I like the idea that it was a bunch of banks trying to push us around instead of this this one character. But I mean, like you're saying, like the evidence kind of piles up to where I'm kind of with you on that, and kind of does make sense just in some of the behavior patterns as far as just like putting out a bunch of information where it's kind of like worded the same and all that. It's just I don't really like the idea of doxing someone, but I mean, like you were saying at the beginning of this, like whenever you spit out a bunch of false information and get people to make all these different moves as far as people's actual wealth that they're trying to protect, I think that kind of warrants a different case to where you're hiding behind that anonymity is not really I mean, like, the anonymity set, it's like, as long as you don't rock the boat, right? Nobody's going to come looking at you. But you start rocking that boat like that, I mean, geez. I mean, yeah, better really mind your P's and Q's on that. And, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of action taken against this individual if it is proven to be so. But then again, I don't know. We'll see.
So the thing I want to point out is that this is actually not the first time that he's been doxxed, or that someone has attempted to dox him and found this guy, Spencer. I don't know if Shinobi, because I haven't looked at I'm hearing about this report right now. I didn't even look at it before the show. But I was surprised that it actually found the same character that a bunch of other people did about a year ago. And I don't know if the report mentions it, but he also had a Twitter account that I think he like the name was Spencer, and I think he was even using the same the handle was the same as his Reddit account, I think. I can't remember because it was almost a year ago now. And then someone actually made a spoof account with that same picture that he was using for the Twitter account, and started tweeting at Bitfinexed with that name, and spoofed handle. So that was almost a year ago now. So I'm surprised that it took this long to come out, but maybe some of the better evidence took this long to be able to come out, because I believe a year ago the only connection between him and Bitfinex was some of the language consistencies that you pointed out. I don't know if all of them existed because I haven't looked at it in a while, but yeah, this is not the first time he's been doxxed, and so it doesn't surprise me really, because it's another case where someone does not properly separate their accounts. And one of the biggest things that gives you away is how you use language. So you have to be really careful if you're doing something like this to not use catchphrases that are, number one, unique, in terms like there's catchphrases that even someone who like speaks English but is not a native English speaker would not know. So that automatically gives you away if you use catchphrases that are particular to a specific region of English speakers. And it also gives you away to use very specific catchphrases that only you have ever used. Like that's automatically a mistake.
Yep. But fuck you, moron. Eat shit.
Now that we know who he is, maybe we can ask him what his position was and how much he lost as to why he got so pissed off about Bitfinex.
All right, though. Got 25 minutes to go.
Well, just before we move on, because I've recently had to deal with this question of whether it makes sense to dox someone, and ended up deciding not to do it in a public way, but still releasing enough information that should give people who are supporting this guy pause to question whether that was a good idea to continue supporting this person. And I have to say that I was supremely disappointed in the response, because even though what I did publish showed that he didn't know anything about what he was talking about, I was still getting people sending me messages defending this guy. And I just want to say, like when you have people engaging in this sort of disinformation and someone calls them out for it, the best thing, if you don't know what to do, is to just be quiet and maybe ask more questions. If you start defending them when they clearly don't have any ground and they're actively harming the community, then I'm not going to trust you either. I don't trust people who defend people who spread disinformation. So all of the people connected to Bitfinex, all of the people connected to this other person that I outed several weeks ago, not their identity, but I outed them as being a fraud. I've lost trust in several people, because not only were there people who didn't step up, who I asked to step up, and a lot of us asked to step up to point this out, they didn't. And then some people actively still defend this person, and it's really disappointing. But the good thing about these sort of events is that you figure out where, like one person may be spreading the disinformation, but if you're surrounded by people who either don't see through that disinformation but are pretending to be experts in the space, well, you should probably question whether those people deserve the position they have. Maybe they're not frauds, but they're certainly misrepresenting their skill set. If I've been in this space for 4 years now, and it didn't take me. I pretty much research this stuff, almost every day, but so do a lot of other, or at least a lot of other people claim to do that. So if I'm able to do that, then the people who have been here since basically the beginning should be able to do that too.
Agreed.
All right, though. Next up, finally, an update from India to some degree. The Supreme Court, what is it now? 3 days ago, so on the 25th, on Thursday, pretty much gave the government 2 weeks to clearly articulate its position on the legality of cryptocurrency in the country. Shortly after the arrest of the Uno Coin CEO and the seizure of the Bitcoin ATM that was established. And so this is kind of coming to a head. I mean, ultimately, they pretty much have 2 weeks now on the challenge from the Supreme Court to clearly articulate whether cryptocurrencies are legal, illegal, to define a clear stance on regulations, and pretty much put an end to the years so far of just dancing around and refusing to actually put down a clear stance on the law books in terms of these issues. And I'm not really sure how to expect this to really play out. I mean, we can clearly see with the arrest of the Unocoin CEO and the seizure of the ATM that they are clearly intent on continuing to disrupt this ecosystem in new ways, despite the RBI circular having already pretty much shut out all access to fiat financial services. We know that there were whispers from an individual who was involved in the government committee working on crafting some kind of regulatory or legal position on cryptocurrencies that they were considering outright outlawing the possession of cryptocurrencies in India. And so, yeah, I obviously, as an American, don't really have anything even approximating an in-depth understanding or on-the-ground perspective. But just as an outsider looking in, I'm personally not really seeing this in too positive a light. And I think that if the previous reports of this cryptocurrency committee established by the government recommending making it completely illegal to even possess are accurate, then I think there is a pretty decent chance that the government's response to this request from the Supreme Court is going to be negative in the sense of potentially actually pushing and going with a recommendation to outlaw possession of cryptocurrencies. And if that were to happen, that would be absolutely devastating to the entire ecosystem in this country. I mean, this would put even an average Indian citizen at risk of arrest and prosecution simply for possessing cryptocurrencies. And that brings up all kinds of just shady fringe cases and dangers. I mean, for instance, if you have been on record purchasing cryptocurrencies from an exchange, what do? How do you prove that you no longer possess them aside from turning them over to a government? Let's say that you're on record for having bought X amount of Bitcoin, but you don't have all of that anymore because you have traded it away. You have sold it in some non-documented way. You've spent it. And now the government comes knocking and asking for proof that you have given up the original amount that you no longer have in total. How can you prove that you don't have what you've spent or sold anymore? Like if things were to be made illegal overnight and the government actually takes serious measures to enforce that, that could get very potentially dangerous in the legal sense for any Indian person who's actually invested in cryptocurrencies, because all of your information will be registered in these exchange databases and the government will be able to ascertain that you purchased cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, just like the story kind of goes back to that. Just like, yeah, I mean, first of all, it's good to hear something coming out of India as far as getting some more information as to how that circular is going to go and how the crypto industry stands there, because it's been a while since that got put in place with no real word. And it's gotten to this point to where, you know, big companies like UnoCoin had to set up an ATM to try and just like, you know, keep businesses moving forward even through this, you know, unshaky, uneasy time of not knowing what exactly is going to happen to their industry in the country. And, you know, he was arrested. We covered that last episode, and it's just like, this is where I guess like just even a little bit of clarity, like that arbitration in China can go a long way, and just sort of saying like, okay, you know, we don't have to sweat this aspect of what exactly is going on, because yeah, it would be a nightmare scenario if like all of a sudden they said, yeah, you know, you had X amount of Bitcoins you bought from this exchange. Now, where are they? And, you know, it's like, well, I spent them. Well, how can you prove that? It's like, well, yeah, that's that could be a nightmare scenario. And so hopefully once, what is it? The RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, actually comes out and says, at least has a defined position as to where they stand on this and what exactly is going on. But yeah, because right now it's just really everybody's in the dark over there, to where you have businesses trying to make a move and then, you know, they get in trouble for it. And so it'd be good to get some guidelines.
Well, considering that, I mean, there aren't too many countries around the world who have outright banned Bitcoin, if I remember correctly. So for India to do something like that, it would be a big deal because they have a huge population. So that would be a huge population that would be subjected to that kind of hardline policy against it. But to be honest, I mean, yes, like the above ground whitelisted business aspect would obviously suffer because no whitelisted business is going to deal with Bitcoin. But on the other hand, I think that at some point we're going to have to test, you know, how censorship resistant this thing is, in terms of like, you know, if the only thing that's required to take it down is for the government to outlaw it, well then this is kind of pointless, isn't it? um like I mean, it should be, in principle, it should be much easier than gold to conceal the ownership of, because you know, gold is a large, bulky physical object where you have to have, if you you know, want to actually hold your wealth in that, you have to have a significant amount of gold, which would take up a significant amount of space and can be found. Whereas with Bitcoin, it doesn't matter how much you have, it takes up the same amount of space, like physical space. So I mean, all you need is, you know, some words on a piece of paper and you have your Bitcoin. And how hard is that to detect if people really care about holding Bitcoin and not their, you know, increasingly worth as fiat currency? Like, I mean, that has to be tested at some point, whether people are willing to do that if they really care enough, and making that kind of thing easier as well. Like, there's, you know, there should be eventually standards for ways that you can store your seed or your private key in a way that, you know, it's not, it doesn't make it hard to access, but it still obscures the fact that that's what it is in the first place, which may be really helpful for people living in areas where it's not friendly to cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
I mean, that's just like, it's fucked up to see. Like at the end of the day, the Indian people would be the ones getting hurt there. I mean, exactly like the fucking horse shit we saw when they pretty much demonetized 80% of their cash supply. Like this doesn't hurt anybody except their own people.
Yeah, that's where it's
All right.
important to educate, man.
All right, we've got a little less than 20 minutes though, and still 3 things to get through. So, first up, Bitfury is rumored purportedly to be considering an IPO or a debt financing deal in Europe, and supposedly been approaching a few banks in Amsterdam, London, or Hong Kong. So I mean, this could be kind of interesting. I mean, one, there still really hasn't been any big IPO in terms of a crypto company. And secondly, Bitfury doesn't really have the most efficient chips out there. They don't really have the scale of any other company in the space, but they have been pretty steady and they have really branched out beyond just the mining hardware, especially their blockchain forensic software and services. So, I mean, this could really play out a lot better than Bitmain's attempt at an IPO so far, especially in Europe. It's I don't know.
But yeah, it would play out better than Bitmain's drastic. I mean, like they made that stupid decision with Bitcoin Cash, and they kind of made a few errors along the way. Where, yeah, I mean, Bitfury has been slow and steady, but I mean, like certainly they are kind of developing some things that aren't necessarily the best. But yeah, I get it. Where people that might be investing in an IPO would be interested and see that as something positive. I mean, I can definitely see it happen.
Yeah, I mean, to be better than Bitmain, that's not much of a standard, is it? I mean, I don't know. Based on the responses that I got when they were at the Lightning Hack Day in Berlin, I'm not too enthusiastic about them coming to Europe or any of that. Just don't want your software, stay away. Not going to use anything that uses your software. So even if you become successful, well, that success is to the detriment of Bitcoin fungibility. So I hope you all fail.
Well, I mean, ultimately, that's
What's that program called again?
Crystal.
Crystal.
And I'm just checking their website, and shit, this seems to be, you can already use it. And wow, I didn't know their thing is so progressed. So yeah, it looks like we just have another huge player in blockchain analytics, which is kind of sad, but oh well.
But I mean, it's like ultimately, like I really don't know what to make of this in terms of like the rationale behind it. Like, is this them pretty much in a similar situation to Bitmain in terms of funding and capital, like trying to extend the runway when it's kind of running short, or is this just them trying to kind of really take the next step there and really kind of establish themselves in the markets of Europe? I know Europe was one of the first countries to really start looking at mixing or privacy solutions in a very negative light. And a lot of the regulatory talk there has kind of been leaning in the direction of considering it money laundering, or really moving towards being a lot stricter in terms of compliance and enforcement of things like that. So it's, I'm kind of in the same boat as Janine. I'm not really happy about this at all, and I definitely do not want to see this company succeed in the long term.
I mean, like to me, I really feel like it seems like they would be doing this more for that second reason. It's not like they're hard up for cash, just that they want to be that first one across the finish line. I guess it's because it seems like the IPO thing is like just like the ETF thing. It's like everybody's trying to do it, and so maybe they want to just be the first ones across that finish line.
Mm-hmm. All right, so second to last, the IRS Advisory Committee in Congress is just released a 95-page report, pretty much looking at possible ways to improve the tax code as far as the IRS is concerned. And a number of things that they brought up were related to cryptocurrencies, specifically the burden on actually not just reporting tax liabilities in cryptocurrency, but actually keeping track of and managing all of this, given that each individual trade and transaction is currently considered a capital gains event. And one of the things that I thought was really kind of absurd here is they cited a report or research from Fundstrat Global Advisors in April, where Fundstrat estimated $25 billion in tax liabilities within the US in terms of cryptocurrency gains. And it's not really covered directly in this Bitcoin Magazine article, but part of the place they're coming from in estimating that is simply looking at the market cap increase in cryptocurrencies and extrapolating capital gains from that, which is really kind of absurd in the fact that if people are just coming in and it's only a very small minority that is actually selling anything during this course of time, most people are simply holding on to the asset, then they don't actually have any tax liabilities as those gains are unrealized. And so I really find it kind of a little unnerving and a little like just disturbing and like confusing to see an actual report being pushed by an advisory committee to the IRS quoting numbers like this when it's literally just napkin math. It's just, oh, well, the market capitalization increased by this much, so there's probably this much tax liability unpaid out there, and it's completely fucking absurd. Like it's literally just a kid in a candy shop going like this much because of just what they're looking at in front of them. Like there's no real basis to assume that kind of figure without actual documentation of people selling and realizing gains to that degree. And while I do think it's good that we have this committee asking for more clarity, I think it's kind of fucked up that this kind of fast and loose projections is going before the IRS in tandem with that, because I'm not really sure how they're going to react to it.
Yeah, I mean, like I was reading this, I was just like, it would be good to get some clarity on the issue, but yeah, I don't know if that's actually what this is here. This is just like the idea of like there's this much taxes out there that we could go for it. Yeah, I mean, they really just need to fix that. I mean, there's some, like we were saying earlier, I think Wyoming has fixed that to where it's not a taxable event whenever you exchange one for another. I think that that's trying to be pushed through here to where there is there was that guidelines pushed out by Colorado to where they're trying to make it to where there's like a a standard as far as like you need to have this KYC AML in place in order to do this type of function. So I mean, like, yeah, as far as the IRS taxes go, I mean, like that's just like a headache here in the United States that they need to figure out, man. They really do need to just, because that's one of the big things that everybody talks about is like, oh man, I would like to do this, but the taxes on that, I don't think I'd rather just hold it. So like I don't know, they need to get it figured out, and it just doesn't look like they're really trying to do that.
Yeah. All right, though. The last one, worst. So, Mastercard has filed for a patent on a fractional reserve management and payment system for blockchain assets.
Oh my God.
Wrap Bitcoin is fractional reserve Bitcoin.
So the patent is pretty much looking at a system that would simultaneously track crypto and fiat in kind of a wallet structure that would segregate fiat and crypto. And yeah, compared to this, even I have to say I love you, Coinbase, because there is not a shred of evidence, unless you want to argue the UTXO incident in terms of unspendable UTXOs would constitute fractional reserve, that Coinbase has operated under fractional reserve, despite all of the shady shit they've done, the complete incompetence. Every indication shows that they are fully reserved in terms of their crypto liabilities. And here we have Mastercard literally outright trying to patent a fractional reserve system for Bitcoin. So first off, I want to say this is hilariously stupid. And honestly, at the end of the day, this kind of thing is just setting themselves up to get completely fucked. Because Bitcoin moves like that. And a bank run in Bitcoin is done like that. And if people come knocking for crypto reserves that you do not have and you become insolvent, you are fucked. There is no central bank of Bitcoin. There is no lender of last resort. If you have increased your liabilities beyond what exists to actually meet those liabilities and they run your bank, you are fucked. You are going to hit bankruptcy. You are going to create a gigantic shit show, and you will probably destroy the public willingness to ever use a system like this involving cryptocurrencies whatsoever, ever again. Because there is no lender of last resort. There is no bank that can just pump those dollars into your reserves and everybody's fine. Whoever doesn't get Bitcoin out of that is fucked and is stuck with fiat. If you're even capable of meeting the crypto liabilities in fiat terms. Now, beyond that, this is just hilarious. So, here's a little excerpt from the patent. Thus, there is a need to improve on the storage and processing of transactions that utilize blockchain currencies. Existing payment networks and payment processing systems that utilize fiat currencies are specially designed and configured to safely store and protect consumer and merchant information and credentials and to transmit sensitive data between computing systems. Yes! Yes! The thing that ties your personal identifying information to each request for a payment is designed to be secure. The thing that literally has one authorization code, effectively, that submits a debit that winds up with you having a financial liability, one single thing used over and over again that, if compromised, allows people to credit things to your name. That is specifically designed for security. It's not the push-based cryptographic system where each signature of a payment is useful one time and one time only, debiting a single thing and crediting it to another person that one time and is completely impossible to reuse, completely disconnected from any personal identifiable information. It's not that system that was specially designed and configured to safely protect consumer and merchant information and credentials. No. It's the system that I cannot even count or keep track of how many times it has been compromised and cost millions and millions of dollars because people's private information was compromised, leaked. People's credentials to make a payment was compromised, leaked. So, like, this is just beyond absurd. This is effectively Mastercard trying to say that they and their system are more secure in protecting people's private information, more secure in protecting the information necessary to authorize a payment than a end user cryptographically designed push-based system that is literally impossible to take the information transmitted while making a payment and use it to make a future payment.
Yeah, we're in a ridiculous spot here. I mean, like, when I saw this story, I even saw another story about Visa talking about doing something with crypto. It's like, that's where we know we've hit some sort of peak here where it's like, we've already gotten to the point where banks are definitely in and they're trying to, create all their products. And now you got these guys that are just, have always sort of been like some of the big problems. And they're just like, yeah, we're going to, possibly get involved in this too. Yeah.
Yeah. So please, Mastercard, please, Jesus H. Christ, do this. I want to see the bank run. I want to see you go fucking bankrupt. Please do it. Please. Because this is one thing that actually might wake your normal person who doesn't understand how any of this work up to the fact that they should absolutely never trust companies like you. Please do this.
Well,
I-
that's
I
that's the
believe
that's the problem, Shinobi. They're never going to go bankrupt because the government's just going to bail them out again.
People won't get their Bitcoin though. They'll get fucking fiat
No, they won't.
instead.
Yeah.
And won't be able to ever get that amount of Bitcoin back. So they'll figure that out real quick.
We get wrapped Bitcoin.
They'll just have to wait another 10 years for people to forget what they did wrong, and then they'll do this again.
All right. Final thoughts time. Janine, I loaded yours already, so let's go.
Yeah, so my final thought is just kind of a PSA because the Electronic Frontier Foundation failed to do a PSA as they did really absurdly a few months ago with the PGP client stuff. So I'm doing it for them. There was a problem discovered with the Signal desktop app, which is they've been storing the decryption key in plain text since who knows how long. Which basically means you can access, I can't remember what the folder is, but you can basically open a folder for the Signal desktop app in whatever app settings, and you can take the decryption key, which is stored in plain text, and then you can decrypt all of the messages that are supposed to be locally stored and encrypted on your device, basically rendering the encryption process mute. So if you use Signal desktop, you should probably stop. You should probably stop using Signal in general because the number of things that like red flags and stuff that I've noticed in the past half year or so, it's honestly like it's a piece of shit in so many ways. It's definitely better. Like if you're not using anything, Signal is better, but you know, there's other apps like Wire which use the Signal protocol and actually let you create accounts that don't require a phone number, which is the biggest problem with Signal. So if you can move to something other than Signal, even if you don't use any encrypted messaging apps at the moment, I would just skip over Signal and use something like Wire because it uses the Signal protocol without all of the fallouts. So yeah, or if you want to continue using Signal, you should probably not use Signal desktop anymore because basically if your device gets compromised, then you're screwed.
Yep.
Ouch.
All right, Rick, got a thought for us?
Yeah, I got a thought, but it's no tweet or anything. I just wanted to sort of give a shout out to our viewing audience. I really appreciate just like the app, people communicating in here. I really, it's one of those things where every time we do a podcast, it's like we don't really stress that like how much we appreciate the audience, like in like our group of peers coming together and stuff like that. I really enjoy that. And so, yeah, just a shout out to the audience. Hope everybody's doing okay. It's Sunday or it's Monday, wherever you're at. Hope it's a good day. I hope you have a great week. And Max, have a good vacation, man.
All right, no part. Give us a thought, you stupid idiot.
Christ, man.
I don't know. Rick said everything. It's like you can't say anything after Rick's monologue. It's you should learn that.
You can.
What's-
Come on, you got a big event coming up real soon, no fire.
Yeah, yeah. Bitcoin birthday and
What's gonna happen then?
Yeah, we are releasing Wasabi Wallet 1.0 and
Woohoo!
making Bitcoin anonymous again.
There we go.
Man. We'll trip up those Pinson guys.
All right. And my final thought is anybody out there mining with an S9, fuck Bitmain's firmware. Brain OS has released their Wolfram firmware update. It's got ASIC boot support for all the S9s. And it seems to be taking off pretty quickly because in the last, what is this? Yeah, last weekish or so, we have seen over ASIC boost use on the network jump from around 5% all the way up to almost 10% of the network hash rate. So get that shit going, guys.
wait, Shinobi, are you encouraging people to do fake proof of work again?
Yeah, why the fuck wouldn't you? You make more money until everybody else is doing it. It's
Why are we
fucking
all
common sense.
Well, I thought this all got solved with SegWit. I thought that was supposed to like stop all this fake proof of work nonsense.
Oh, I see what you're doing. You're pretending you're stupid like that other idiot. I get it.
Okay, for anyone who doesn't get the joke, there's a difference between overt and covert ASIC boost, and SegWit has nothing to do with overt ASIC boost because it's a different type of ASIC boost that uses version rolling. There, I just explained the joke and ruined it.
All right. Well, I
You
guess
just explained the
guys-
joke and people are gonna think.
Because it wasn't joke, it was educational. It's a very important point to point out.
Very.
All right. Everybody, toodaloo. We will see you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Later, everyone.